All right, settle in, folks, because tonight I want to let you in on something most of you never saw. You know, for 30 years on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, everything looked smooth, polished, like a Swiss watch. Curtain opens, I walk out, tell a few jokes, sit behind the desk, and boom, America relaxes for an hour. Yeah, that's what you saw. What you didn't see was the circus backstage. I'm talking about a reality so unpredictable, sometimes even we didn't know what kind of show we were about to have. Because behind that curtain, that's where the guests were waiting. And let me tell you, sometimes they weren't just waiting, they were orbiting another planet. I had a bit of a sixth sense about it. The second someone walked out, I could tell. Didn't matter who it was, movie star, rock legend, Nobel Prize winner. Give me 5 seconds and I knew. I'd look at them and think, okay. This one's been drinking, this one's floating, this one's seen colors the rest of us can't even pronounce. And I'd get that look, half amused, half, oh boy, here we go. Now, behind the scenes, we actually had systems for this. Yeah, real systems. Production assistants watching like hawks. Segment producers with backup plans. Executives hovering like nervous parents at a school play. We even had code signals. If I touched my tie while introducing someone, that meant brace yourselves. This guest is not entirely with us. If I straightened my cards twice, that was for the director. Keep it simple. Don't get fancy. This could go sideways. Oh, yeah. This was all very organized chaos. Because you have to understand the time. This was the 70s, wild time. You'd have Oscar winners, music legends, literary giants showing up in a state where they could barely remember why they were there. And my job? Make it look like everything was perfectly normal. Basically, I was hosting a talk show and babysitting at the same time. Now, sometimes it worked beautifully. Take George Carlin. George would walk out, big grin, eyes just a little, let's say, relaxed. And you knew right away he wasn't hiding anything. That was part of the package. And the thing is, he was still brilliant. He'd sit there and just riff, like a philosopher who wandered into a comedy club by accident. Stream of consciousness, wild ideas, hilarious connections. Stuff you couldn't script if you tried. We called him a functioning herbalist, which is a polite way of saying the man was high, but sharper than most people sober. So with George, I didn't fight it. I leaned into it. I'd toss him a topic and just get out of the way. And the audience, they loved it. Now, compare that to Richard Pryor. Richard was something else entirely. Genius, no question, one of the funniest men to ever live. But unpredictable. Like holding a lit firecracker and hoping it doesn't go off in your hand. He could start an interview as the funniest guy in the room, and then suddenly drift somewhere else entirely. You'd see it happen, mid-sentence. Eyes shift, energy changes. And now I'm thinking, all right, we're losing him. Bring him back, bring him back. So I jump in, redirect, crack a joke, guide him back to safer ground. It was like being a traffic cop, but the traffic was going through another dimension. And I'll tell you something. People think a host's job is to get laughs. No, sometimes your job is to protect the guest, because I could have let him crash and burn. Easy laughs, big reaction, but that's not the game. You help him land safely. You keep his dignity intact. That's the job. Now, not everybody made it easy. Let me tell you about Truman Capote. Now here's a man, brilliant writer, sharp mind, fantastic guest, usually. But one night, he came out, and right away I knew we were in trouble. He was slurring, head bobbing, eyes struggling to stay open, and I'm sitting there thinking, this is not going to be a conversation. This is going to be a rescue mission. I simplified the questions, slowed things down, tried to keep it together, but there's only so much you can do when someone is barely conscious. And that's where I draw the line. See, there's a difference between someone being a little loose and someone being completely gone. That night, crossed the line. We cut to commercial. And let's just say, I made it clear backstage, that wasn't happening again. Because there are rules, simple rules. Don't disrespect the audience, don't waste airtime, and don't put me in a position where I have to explain what just happened. Break those, you're done. Now on the flip side, you had guys like Cheech Marin and Tommy Chong. With those two, what you saw was exactly what you got. no pretending, no hiding. They'd come out completely in their world. And instead of working around it, I played into it. I'd act like the straight guy, confused, innocent, asking questions like, "I'm sorry, what exactly are you talking about?" And they'd just go. The audience knew. I knew. They knew. Everybody was in on the joke. And that's the key. Authenticity. If that's who you are, fine. Be that. Just make it entertaining. Now, sometimes things went beyond entertaining, like when Peter Fonda showed up. Let me put it this way. I asked him about his next movie, and somehow we ended up discussing time not being linear. Yeah, 5 minutes into the interview, I realized we were no longer in the same reality, so I gave the signal, cards tapped twice. "Get me out of here." Commercial break. When we came back, new guest. No explanation. Smooth. Clean. Move on. That's television. But then, there are moments where it's not funny anymore, like Oliver Reed. He came out, already gone. Not just relaxed, volatile. Started loud, got louder, interrupting, shouting, then suddenly standing up like he's about to demonstrate something physical. Now the crew's watching. Security's inching closer. And I'm thinking, all right, this is no longer a show. This is a situation. So I shut it down. Firm. Direct. Segment over. Because I don't care who you are. Big star, big ego. If you can't control yourself, you don't sit at that desk. Simple as that. Now, not all of it was chaos. Sometimes it was just energy, like Sammy Davis Jr. Sammy comes out, and it's like someone turned the dial to 11, then broke it off, talking fast, moving fast, stories going in 5 directions at once. Now maybe you're watching at home thinking, wow, Sammy's in a great mood tonight. And backstage, people are thinking something else entirely. But here's the difference. He was still in control, still sharp, still entertaining, still delivering. So my job, keep up, guide the rhythm, let him shine, without letting it spiral. And afterward, I remember wiping my brow and saying, I think I just got secondhand exhaustion. Now, when you look at all of this, all these moments, it really tells you something about the time and about the job. Because I wasn't just hosting a talk show. I was navigating a cultural shift. The rules were changing. What used to be shocking became normal. And somewhere in the middle of that, I had to keep the show together. Not judge, not preach. Just make good television. And here's the philosophy, simple one. I don't care what you do before the show, but when you sit down here, you deliver. If you can do that, we're fine. If you can't, we have a problem. Because at the end of the day, people tune in for one reason. They want to be entertained, not to watch someone fall apart, not to see a train wreck. They want to laugh, relax, forget about their day. And my job, every night, no matter what walked through that curtain, was to make sure they got exactly that. And somehow, through all the chaos, all the unpredictability, we did. And you know, when you sit in that chair long enough, night after night, guest after guest, you start to realize something. It's not just about who walks out from behind the curtain. It's about what shape they're in when they get there. Because by the mid-70s, the world had changed. And believe me, the Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson didn't exist in some clean little bubble away from all that. No. Whatever was happening out there, in Hollywood, in music, in culture, it walked right through those studio doors and sat across from me. And sometimes it sat down very comfortably. Now the place where all of this really began was the green room. Ah, yes, the green room. That innocent little waiting area where guests are supposed to relax before the show. Relax. Yeah, let me tell you, there was more anxiety in that room than in a room full of students before final exams, because coming on that show, that wasn't just another interview. This was the show. You did well here? Your career could take off overnight. You bombed? Oh, people remembered. And the difference back then, this wasn't rehearsed television. No scripts handed to you, no carefully pre-planned answers. I liked conversation, real conversation, unpredictable, spontaneous, which sounds great Unless you're the one sitting in that chair thinking, I have no idea what he's going to ask me. So what happens? Well, nerves meet opportunity. And opportunity often came in liquid form. That green room bar? Legendary. Top shelf everything. And officially, the rule was simple. 1 drink? Fine. 2 drinks? You're pushing it. 3 drinks? Well, now we're going to find out how good I am at my job. And enforcing that rule with major celebrities? Good luck. Now, beyond the bar, there were other, let's call them personal arrangements, private stashes, helpful friends, entourages who thought, hey, let's take the edge off before you go on national television. And sometimes they took a little more than the edge off. You have to remember the era. This was the time of Studio 54, rock stars living like emperors, even Wall Street guys acting like they were in a rock band. So, of course, that culture showed up on television. Now me, I enjoyed a drink now and then, but when that red light came on, I was in control, always, which made things interesting when the person sitting across from me wasn't, because then it became a balancing act. You adjust, you read them, you decide, how do I make this work? If someone was just a little loose, no problem, you guide them gently. If they were drifting, you simplify. Short questions, clear direction. And if things started going off the rails, you find the nearest exit. Commercial break is a beautiful thing. Now, this approach got tested again and again, and one of the most fascinating cases was a guy who practically made it part of his identity, George Carlin. George wasn't trying to hide anything. He'd come out, eyes a little glossy, smile like he just figured out the universe, and the audience knew, I knew, George definitely knew. But here's the thing, he still delivered. Sharp, funny, insightful. He didn't fall apart. He expanded. You'd ask him one question, and suddenly you're on a 10-minute journey through language, society, philosophy, and somehow it all makes sense. That's rare. Very rare. Most people, you give them that relaxed state, and they forget where the sentence started. George, he turned it into an art form. But even then, there were limits. He came on the show over 100 times. Audience loved him. I loved him. But I never let him guest host, and people always wondered why. Simple. Reliability. When you hand someone the whole show, 90 minutes, live television, you need to know they'll show up exactly the same way every time. With George, brilliant as he was, that wasn't a guarantee. Now compare that to someone like Richard Pryor. Richard was electricity. Pure, raw, unpredictable electricity. When he was on, there was nobody better. Nobody. He could have you laughing so hard, you forgot where you were. But when things shifted, and they could shift fast, suddenly you're watching a man, not quite in the same place as the rest of us. I remember moments where he'd start a story, and then halfway through, it just dissolved. Thoughts breaking apart, focus slipping, and you could feel it. The audience didn't know whether to laugh or just wait. That's when I'd step in, redirect, give him something solid to grab onto. Because again, this isn't about catching someone off guard. It's about getting them through. And I'll tell you something. I had enormous respect for Richard, not just for the talent, but for the fight he was in. Because behind that brilliance, there was a struggle. And you don't exploit that. You handle it with care. Now, sometimes care isn't enough. Sometimes you get a situation like Truman Capote. And folks, that night was not a conversation. That was a slow motion collapse. He came out, and immediately, I knew. Words slurring, head dropping, eyes barely cooperating. And I'm sitting there thinking, all right, let's see what we can salvage. I tried everything. Short questions, clear topics. But when someone can't stay present, there's nothing to build on. And here's the truth. That's not entertaining. That's uncomfortable. And I don't do uncomfortable. So we got through it, somehow. But afterward, I made it very clear. That's not happening again. Because like I said before, there are rules. And one of them is simple. Respect the audience. They gave you their time. The least you can do is show up ready. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you had guys like Cheech Marine and Tommy Chong. With them, it was almost refreshing. No pretending, no hiding, no confusion. They were exactly what you expected them to be. And instead of working around it, I made it part of the act. I'd play the straight guy, act confused, ask innocent questions, and they'd go off into their world. And the audience loved every second of it, because it felt honest. And honesty, even when it's a little hazy, works. Now, not every situation could be handled that way. Sometimes things got strange, like with Peter Fonda. Now Peter comes out, and right away, something's different. Eyes locked onto the lights, then his hands, then back to me, like he's tuning a radio. So I ask a simple question, and he starts answering. And suddenly we're talking about time not being linear, and consciousness being a wave. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, we've officially left the building. So I gave the signal. Tap the cards twice. Director knows, get us out. Commercial break. When we come back, different guest, no explanation. That's the trick. Never let the audience feel the chaos. Just move forward. Because that's the job. Keep the show moving, no matter what just happened. And believe me, sometimes what just happened was something you couldn't make up if you tried. Now, not every moment behind that desk was about chaos you could gently steer back on course. Some nights, you had to take control in a very different way, because there's a line between unpredictable television and this is no longer safe or workable. And when that line gets crossed, you don't get to be polite about it. You act. Let me tell you about Oliver Reed. Now, Oliver walked out, and you didn't need a medical degree to understand the situation. This wasn't subtle, and this was obvious from the first step. He was already gone, far past a few drinks, far past having a good time. And at first, I tried to do what I always did. Keep it light, keep it moving, see if we can land it. But very quickly, it became clear this wasn't that kind of night. He's interrupting, talking over me, voice rising, energy turning aggressive, and I can feel the room change. That's something you learn in television. You feel the temperature shift. Crew gets quiet. Security starts moving closer. Nobody's laughing anymore. And I'm thinking, all right, this isn't entertainment anymore. So I stop playing along. I take control. Firm questions, direct interruptions, no dancing around it, because when a guest crosses into hostility or unpredictability like that, you don't guide it, you contain it, and if needed, you end it. That's exactly what happened. Segment cut short, clean break. And after the show, I made one thing very clear to the booking staff. He doesn't come back. No debate, no second chances. And that wasn't about ego. That was about boundaries. I didn't care how famous you were. If you couldn't sit in that chair and respect the audience, the crew, and the show, you didn't sit there again. Simple as that. Now that situation was the extreme end. But not every guest who came out in a, let's call it, altered state was a problem. Some were just operating on a completely different frequency, like Sammy Davis Jr. Now, Sammy was something else entirely. When he hit that stage, it was like someone turned the energy dial all the way up and snapped it off. Fast talking, rapid movement, ideas firing everywhere at once. For the audience, it looked like pure charisma. For everyone behind the scenes, it looked like controlled chaos. But here's the key difference. Sammy never lost the thread. He was always performing, always delivering, even if the engine was running at, let's say, maximum speed. And my job in those moments wasn't to slow him down. It was to keep pace. Guide the rhythm just enough so the audience could enjoy the ride without feeling like the train was going off the rails. And afterward, I remember just sitting there thinking, well, that was a workout. Now, when you step back and look at all of this, George Carlin, Richard Pryor, Truman Capote, Cheech and Chong, Peter Fonda, Oliver Reed, Sammy Davis Jr., it starts to paint a picture of the era. Because this wasn't just about individual guests. This was about a cultural shift happening in real time. The 70s were changing everything: music, film, comedy, attitude, even what people thought was acceptable behavior on television. And I was right in the middle of it, every night, live. Now, my philosophy through all of it was pretty simple. I didn't care what someone did before the show. That wasn't my business. My business started when they sat down in that chair. Could you deliver? Could you respect the audience? Could you give me something I could work with? If yes, we're fine. If no, we had a problem. And my staff used to say I had what they called an impairment radar. I didn't judge it morally. I just adjusted. Someone a little loose? We guide them. Someone drifting? We simplify. Someone brilliant but unpredictable? We ride it out. Someone out of control? We stop it. That was the system. Not written down, but learned over years of live television. Because the truth is, people don't tune in to watch a breakdown. They tune in to be entertained, to laugh, to relax, to forget their day. And my responsibility, every single night, was to protect that experience. Even when the people sitting across from me weren't making it easy. Now, today, people look back on those moments and they try to turn them into scandals or headlines or think pieces. But back then, it was simpler. If it worked on air, it stayed. If it didn't, we fixed it and moved on. No social media, no endless replay cycles, no internet turning every awkward second into a permanent identity. Just live television and a host trying to keep the show steady. And you know what's interesting? A lot of those guests later told me they appreciated it because I didn't expose them. I didn't turn their worst night into a spectacle. I helped them through it, sometimes quietly, sometimes firmly, but always with the same goal. Get them out the other side without losing their dignity. And if there's one thing I learned after all those years, it's this: comedy is timing, television is control. But human beings, they're unpredictable. And sometimes, the most memorable nights on a show like The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson aren't the ones that go perfectly. They're the ones where real life shows up, uninvited, and you just do your best to keep it from falling apart on live television.